Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin, eclectic album reviews and general musical meanderings. We've turned the corner and we are in the home stretch for the end of Tier 1. For the first 6 weeks of 2025, we've listened to 48 new albums, and all this music is going to set the standard for everything we listen to going forward in 2025. All new music, all old music will be judged against the standards that these albums set as we look to finding the best music for 2025 at the end of this year. I've done Tier 1 in different forms throughout the last 2 or 3 years now. This year I really made an effort to sort of get posts to have some sort of coherency, stylistically speaking. But last year, it sort of came up that I ended up with an all Japan post. And you know what? It happened this year too, just completely by accident. It wasn't really intentional, but all the artists on this particular post happen to be Japanese artists. And I very often find that Japanese artists end up creating music that sort of helps me define certain genres, especially kind of oddball genres that fit in between other things. So I think that's the case with a lot of the artists that you'll find here. For example, my first one up today is LITE, Strata. Now, LITE for me was a band that I got into in 2008. Right after Battles came out with Mirrored, I got really into this idea of math rock. And so LITE was one of the first bands that showed up on my table along with Toe and a couple other bands. And they really helped me to define in my mind what math rock is. And I was a really big fan of their early albums, Filmlets and Fantasia, and even saw them play a good set at South by Southwest around that time. Small thing, I was like standing like 5 feet from them. Amazing, amazing show. These guys have chops galore, and in their early days, they really played with a lot of aggression and almost a punk rock attitude, but they were so technical and so musical. I mean, there's some songs from that era that was like my fight song for those times. So I followed LITE for quite a while after that. And what I found was over time, they started kind of moving away from that kind of more aggressive dual guitar approach and started branching off into more sequencing and synthesizers and stuff. And although I thought that stuff was great, I kind of lost interest in it because it didn't quite have the same aggression and conviction that those early albums did. But it's been a while, and I wanted to check out this new album, Strata, that came out. And in some ways, it's even a further digression, but it's almost one that's so far removed, I think, from the original intent that I heard from LITE that it's hard for me to even like look at it in the same way. It's hard for me to compare it because it does follow that little bit softer path that you saw LITE taking. They've had been taking for several years towards something a little bit more jazz fusion, or maybe even in some ways new age style. It doesn't really have that same angular aggression of their early albums. I mean, I have to let go of that. I think they're done with that particular sound, but they still have that really super technical nature, and they do have a really good sense of melodicism and interplay in their music, and I think those things are really super interesting. One of the things that LITE does on this album that's really way different from what they were doing before is that there are vocals on this. In the past, my perception of LITE has always been as an instrumental outfit, and this album has several songs on it that have vocals on them. Now, generally speaking, math rock isn't known for its great vocals, and you'll see that to a degree here. They're a little bit sort of monotone and not super melodic. It kind of gives you the sense of like, you know, the proto math rock band Slint. It kind of gives you the sense of that kind of mumbled, almost like spoken word, using LITE's textures as a backdrop.
Reminds me that I'm small. It's a part of something infinitely tall.
Okay, next up I got Sheena Ringo's Kalk, Samen, Kuri no Hana. Now, this is an album that got a whole bunch of critical acclaim from all sorts of like corners of the blogosphere, which is what made it end up in my wish list in the first place, and how it ended up in my hands after Christmas, birthdays, all the stuff that happens to be this year. Does it live up to all that hype? Well, I absolutely think so. Sheena Ringo has turned out to be a very, very interesting character, a very mercurial personality, and that sort of ever-shifting identity that she has is something that expresses itself both musically and visually. Musically speaking, this album is very stylistically diverse, but it actually hangs together extremely well from a conceptual standpoint. Because superficially speaking, you've got stuff that, you know, could be noise rock on one end, and all the way on the other end, things that sound like they could almost be like TV show themes with, you know, orchestral flourishes. What really holds the whole thing together, I think, is Sheena Ringo's clear concept about what she's trying to get at out of this album, and even to try to describe what that concept is hard to put your finger on. It kind of wouldn't be too unfair to compare this album to Joanna Wang's album last year, Hotel La Route. But that album was very, almost startling in the way that it changed styles from one to the other. And again, this one really, even though it does vary so much stylistically, it has a narrative quality that holds it all together. And this is also strengthened, I think, too, by the way that Sheena Ringo's identity plays with kind of really a variety of Japanese tropes in many ways. I mean, if you look at what she does with her live videos, you'll see her do things that are very like avant-garde and kind of almost punk rock. But then on the other hand, really playing up almost post-World War II concepts of Japanese femininity. And she rolls all these things up into a very convincing package that she delivers on from both a compositional and a conceptual standpoint. Next up, I got Melt Bananas 3+5. Now, Melt Bananas is like a punk rock, noise rock band that's been around for decades. And I don't have a whole lot of familiarity with them besides this one particular album. But this album comes out after a pretty large gap from the previous album, which was one that apparently has their critical acclaim. That's what I want to go back and check out at a later date because I am really fascinated by Melt Banana. But I will tell you that Melt Banana is a lot to take on. Like, if you ever watch the Trolls movies, the Trolls have these different tribes and each tribe makes a different music. Melt Banana would kind of like be the noise rock tribe. They are, to me, a defining example of what noise rock is, because it's loud and it's out of control and it seems almost brimming over with intensity, but it's also really focused and has a sense of like direction to it. Also particularly distinctive is the super high-pitched vocals that, kind of also give it this sort of trollish quality. For a while I thought these vocals were pitch shifted, but actually the lead singer is a female and sings up in this range that really is pushed up to, kind of tweaked, I think, with some EQ to give it an even more like pixie-like quality. But it definitely doesn't quite sound entirely human, and that's part of the thing I think that makes Melt Banana so distinctive on this one. But once you can adjust to the amount of stimulus that you're listening to when you listen to 3+5, it is actually really engaging if it is super intense and feels like, again, you're like listening to something with a strobe light on the whole time. So kind of like LITE has, certainly in the past, provided a sort of iconic example of what math rock is in my mind. I think Melt Banana is a really good example of what noise rock is. For a person who maybe doesn't know what that would sound like, I would check out Melt Banana for sure. And finally, I got Kohachiro Minyata's Shakuhachi, the Japanese bamboo flute. Now, if you're not a seasoned Shakuhachi listener, if it's something that you have not listened to very much, you kind of have to approach these albums as an ambient album, because it is definitely something I think that can be hang back in the background and be used as wallpaper music. But I studied Shakuhachi for several years, so for me, listening to these albums is helping me to reconnect with that style of music and to continue growing my listening to the repertoire attached to the instrument. And this particular album is good for that because it's an example of what they call honkyoku, which is a style of Shakuhachi music that's epitomized by a very specific set of repertoire. And these pieces are very closely connected to Zen Buddhism and meditation techniques. It's a lot of the music, if you're familiar with the Komuso monks who wear the baskets over their heads, you'll see videos and movies of these guys playing. That's the kind of music they're playing. And it's very strongly connected to the breath and breathing, more so than it is to like beat or something like that. Melodies are driven along by how the performer breathes and interacts with the instrument through just an almost normal breathing pattern. Now, to the Western ear, there's aspects of Shakuhachi playing that are easy to overlook. For example, a Shakuhachi the instrument itself has five finger holes in it. But every note on the instrument has, of course, a pitch that goes with it, but there's also like a tonal quality that makes it, unique. So even though you play a certain note with a certain fingering and you have another note with a certain fingering, the goal is not necessarily to make those notes sound the same. Each note has its own character, and the artist is supposed to find that character for each one of those notes and the way that they connect with each other as part of their learning of the instrument. It's extremely nuanced and extremely challenging, and even though you listen to an album of this this, it sounds like there are these kind of random sounds on there, or there's kind of like breathy points. It sounds like he's not getting sounds out that, you know, are pristine flute sounds. That's the way it's supposed to sound. Every single one of those things is practiced and reproduced and is part of the music. So don't take for granted any of the details you listen to when you listen to this music, because it is all there and part of the repertoire. And Kohachiro Minyata on this album really brings them out beautifully. And that's all I got for you guys this time around. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe and share it out with your friends. Also, follow me over on Spotify. I'm putting examples of all this stuff up on one big playlist, and I'm going to keep extending that playlist as we go forward throughout the year. So for those of you that are following the viewer's choice and want to know what's going to happen next, on this Friday, February 21st, I'll post my first poll. And twice a week, we're going to set up polls where you're going to put one album versus the other. And we're going to work through this gigantic bracket. By mid-year, we should have 12 albums out of all these 48, plus all the albums from Tier 2. We're going to refine those down to just 12 albums, piece by piece along the way. So if that sounds like something you'd like to do, please sign up for my Patreon below. And until I see you next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.
Pencils these words on the back of